Hi everyone, welcome back. Today, I am super excited to introduce Cindy Perlin, a licensed clinical social worker, certified biofeedback practitioner, and a chronic pain survivor. She's the founder and CEO of the Alternative Pain Treatment Directory and the author of The Truth About Chronic Pain Treatment: The Best and Worst Strategies for Becoming Pain Free. With over 30 years of experience in private practice in Albany, New York, Cindy has helped countless clients improve both their emotional and physical well being. I am super thrilled to have her here to share her insights on a topic that so many people struggle with, and that is neuropathy. And most importantly, she'll be discussing what we can do about it. So, trust me, this is a conversation you do not want to miss. Welcome, Cindy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So we will go right in. So you are the expert when it comes to holistic pain management. And I always say that when people are dealing, if nothing else will get you motivated to lower your blood sugar, control your blood sugar, be on the path to remission, it will be the onset of nerve pain because it is super frustrating, it is super debilitating, and a lot of people are frustrated about it, right? So I found that a lot of people that are behind this good work, that do all this work for people, they usually have a powerful story behind it. So do you mind sharing with us like what your story is and what led you to doing what you're doing now?
So I'm 72 now.
You
When I
look good.
when I was 25, I hurt my back. I was taking up running to get in better shape, and my back became more and more painful, and the doctor told me to stop running, and I did, but that didn't solve the problem. Everything kept getting worse. Every move I made, I seemed to hurt my back more to the point where I was in pain 24/7 in absolute agony, and none of the doctors knew why, and they couldn't help me. And I was disabled for over 3 years, completely non functional. I was in graduate school at the time, and I had to drop out. And I was just in despair. I went to the most prominent orthopedic surgeon in the area, and he spent 45 minutes with me, told me I had chronic body pain. That was the diagnosis. And he said, "You may be like this for the rest of your life. Just try to live as best you can." So that was, pretty discouraging. And but then a friend recommended I read a book about the mind body approach to healing. It was a book by Norman Cousins, Anatomy of an Illness, about how he laughed his way out of a chronic degenerative, crippling disease. And at the time, I was watching the Holocaust miniseries and reading books about World War II and the Holocaust. And I had no concept at all that the mind had anything to do with what was going on in my body. And he mentioned biofeedback in the book, and it appealed to me. So I found a psychologist who did biofeedback, and that completely turned my life around. My pain was better, 50% better the next day, just because I now had a sense I could have some control over it. And, as I worked with the relaxation biofeedback and incorporated other mind body stuff and other lifestyle changes, I got better. And, I can't say I've been completely pain free ever since. Every once in a while, I do stress myself out and have pain. But, I've been productive and active over the last 47 years or whatever it is.
Wow.
So that got me very interested in not only my own health, but how I could help other people with theirs, because it was such a dramatic change. And I find that the last thing people consider is how the mind affects the body. So
Mm.
even though I can talk about the whole range of alternative pain treatments, I think that's the one that's least discussed and one of the most important issues.
Exactly, and I totally agree with you. And your story is so inspiring. It's amazing how our personal experiences can lead us to solutions to actually, treat ourselves and now, treating other people as well. So I find it very, very Very inspiring. Well, thank you for accepting our invitation. I know the audience is definitely going to get some good insights when it comes to the mind body connection when we're dealing with neuropathy, because this is, like I mentioned before, is something that it's a frustrating thing for most people that are dealing with blood sugar dysregulation and even type 2 diabetes or diabetes, right? So, when it comes to a lot of people, like I mentioned, they experience neuropathy in different ways, right? And I believe that the symptoms depend on the type and even the nerves that it's affecting, right? So, for those that are not familiar with the word neuropathy, all right, and for the focus of this conversation, we're going to just talk about peripheral neuropathy because there's so many different types. What is peripheral neuropathy? What is it?
Well, I can't say I'm an expert specifically on that, but basically it's nerve pain in the hands and feet primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it travels a little further up the leg or whatever, up the arm, but it's
Mm-hmm.
primarily pain that's caused by nerves in the
Mm-hmm.
hands and feet. So it's not muscle pain, which is a very common type of pain. It's nerve pain.
Nerve pain, yeah. And how does it typically show up?
Well, it could show up as tingling, sharp pains, um, any kind of pain you can think of, burning pain. It can
Mm-hmm.
also show up as numbness, where people lose sensation, like in their feet. I had a client once who had type 1 diabetes since she was a child, and she was in her 40s when I met her, and she broke both her feet and didn't know it because her feet
Mm-hmm.
were so numb. She stepped off a curb and something happened. And it wasn't until her feet swelled up and she couldn't walk on them that she knew something was wrong. That's how numb her feet were. So it could show up in numbness also.
Numbness, yeah, and I definitely agree, and it's good that we actually bring in awareness to these signs and symptoms because a lot of people cannot connect the dot, right? They don't even know that it's a nerve damage or something going on. They don't know that it's even related to blood sugar problems or diabetes. They only find out when they go to the doctors, and the doctors are like, "Okay, this pain that you're dealing with." You already have diabetes. That's how most people even find out. They are not able to connect the dot that this is a nerve pain. So I'm glad that we talked about the signs and symptoms, and they differ, right? Not everybody will have the same. Some people describe it as pins and needles, right? And some people maybe have a numbness, someone tingling. So it differs. And like I mentioned, the symptoms depend on the type of neuropathy that you have and also the nerves that are associated or are being affected as well. So, how does it usually happen? Because I know it's related to high blood sugar, right? But how does it really happens without going into the causes yet? How just give us a brief explanation of how it happens.
Well, I think of it as tissue starvation, that the nerves aren't getting nourishment because
Mm-hmm.
of the lack of metabolism of sugar. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so your nerves are getting starved. And what happens when you're stressed, getting into the mind body aspect of it. And a lot of people don't know this. Cold hands and cold feet are a sign of stress. I can shake someone's hand and know how stressed they are, by how cold their hands are. Um, it's one of the so different things happen when you're in the stress response. People are familiar with your heart rate gets higher, your blood pressure might go up, your muscle tension might go up. But there's a couple of things that relate to peripheral neuropathy that people don't understand is related to being stressed. And one of them is that there's reduced circulation to your extremities. Everything that happens in the stress response is geared towards getting your body to fight or flee a dangerous situation. We're wired as if we're still living in primitive times, and our main survival issue is outrunning a tiger, or some other kind of predator. So all the changes in the body that happen when we're stressed have to do with a very primitive survival response. And the reason that the hands and the feet cool is that our body is withdrawing circulation into the major organs and the large muscle groups in the brain, so we can think fast, we can run fast, we can fight off, whatever threats. And, we've all heard stories about superhuman strength, in like a mother being able to lift a car off a child who's been, hit by a car. That's the mobilization of everything we've got into surviving in the moment. And it works really well if that's the problem. But these days, the way we live, people are stressed by non-life threatening things, and we stay in that state permanently, or most of the time. And so our hands and feet get starved of circulation. So if your hands are always cold, that's a sign you're always stressed. And people don't feel that they're stressed if they're really used to it. They only feel stressed when they're really, really stressed. But for many people, just the background, default operating mode is a high stress mode. And so if your hands are always cold, even if you have like been diagnosed with Raynaud's syndrome, it's because you're stressed. Your body is just, in that preparation for fight or flight. Another thing that happens during stress that's related to diabetes is that your body will dump more sugar into your bloodstream because it's giving you the energy to fight or flee. And two other things happen that's really important, which is there's reduced bodily maintenance during that state, and there's reduced bodily repair. So, if you do have an injury, you're going to be less likely to recover, or it's going to take longer if you're in the stress response. And just in terms of, maintaining your body, keeping you healthy, if you're chronically stressed, that's not going to happen. Your immune system is suppressed. So, inflammation can be up. So there's all these different changes that, not paying attention to your mental state can exacerbate these problems.
Mhm. Ooh, that's a good perspective. Like stress is something that we really underestimate. I love what you said, but people don't feel they are stressed because they are used to it. That's a powerful statement. And I want you guys to kind of sit with it and just think through that. And it's really true. We don't feel like we're stressed because we are super used to it, right? So we are constantly going, 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 doing all these things, but our body is like asking, hey, Nana, calm down. You are doing too much. And even I did not know, that's a good thing that you brought up. I did not know the cold hands and feet is a signal that you're stressed. I thought that's a thyroid problem. It could be a thyroid problem. I
Well,
never
it
knew
could
that.
be. It
Yeah.
could be, just in terms of if you're low thyroid, your body probably does the
Yeah.
same thing. Again, I'm not an expert in that, but it's
Yeah.
conserving your energy for the most important things if you're low energy, so, things like hair growth and nail growth and health, those things, aren't prioritized when the body thinks you're in danger. And you were talking about being busy all the time. That's not the only cause of stress. The mind being
The
busy,
mind,
even
yeah.
if you're sitting around, the mind being busy or focused on worry, or,
Hmm.
like me when I was having my back pain, filling my mind with, some of the worst things that have happened in human history and
Hmm.
focusing on that. And the reason I was doing that is I was trying to distract from the pain. I was
Yeah.
trying to, that interested me. It fascinated me, that subject. So I was filling my mind with that, not understanding that that made a difference. And when I read Anatomy of an Illness about how he just filled his mind with, funny things, and
Yeah.
he figured that out before the science was there. The science says that when you laugh, your body makes endorphins, which are your body's natural opioids.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, that wasn't discovered yet. It was just he found out when he did his own research that, will to live was really important. And he was thinking, well, what makes my life worth living? Well, laughter makes my life worth living. So he arranged his life so that he could laugh as much
Mhm.
as he could. And that's another, not directly related to peripheral neuropathy, but if you're in pain, find something to laugh at. And these days, we have movies on demand, we have stand-up comedy on demand, we have funny books on demand. So you can always find something funny. Cat videos. I'm a big cat fan.
Yeah.
Lots of funny cat videos. So
Social media brings the humor.
right, right. I get really pulled into like I'll be on Facebook and I'll watch a reel and then I'll go to the next one and the next one and the next one, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
Great health tips, funny stuff, lots of cat stuff. So you don't have to stay fixated on your worries. I tell my clients that if you're not actively solving a problem, don't spend time focusing on it. You
Okay.
know. So you can worry, 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 but if you're not figuring out what you're going to do to fix it, you're just making yourself sick over it.
Yeah, I love that. If you're not actively solving a problem, don't be fixated on it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And it's really true because we really cannot separate the mind from the body. They are all interconnected. So really, if you're looking for that true healing, you really have to address everything. You cannot
Right.
just separate the mind from the body. So that's a good point that you made right there. That's awesome. So I know we've already gone into some of the strategies, which is laughter, and I'm the queen of laughter. I laugh all the time. I love it. So that should help me with my neuropathy, I guess, if I end up getting it like later in life. But now that we know the connection, right? We know that you had mentioned stress. You had also mentioned, I know you mentioned slightly about inflammation with it, which is a cause of neuropathy as well, and even autoimmune attack on your nerves. So these are causes of neuropathy, right? Is there anything else that you want us to talk about in terms of the causes before we dive into like
Well,
strategies and what we can
well,
do to help?
yeah, just in terms of the mind body stuff, I think well, there's a couple of more things. So, one of the things that will cause chronic stress is unresolved trauma.
Mm,
So, a lot of people have, especially childhood trauma, um, and they just say, I'm going to just move on from that, unconsciously or consciously. If you have trauma in your past, and it could also be single incident trauma, like sexual assault or living through a natural disaster, things like that. If you haven't adequately processed that, you're going to be chronically stressed and easily triggered by any reminder of it. So something else
mm,
to focus on. And another thing is something called central sensitization, which is if you've been in chronic pain for a really long time, your brain can get stuck on continuing to send pain signals even when there's no reason to. So the body sends pain signals to alert you something's wrong and needs attention.
mhm.
And there are situations where your brain gets stuck on sending pain signals for no reason at all. So, another thing to be aware of.
Awesome. So Cindy, I'm not sure whether you can speak to this. I want us to go back to that emotional trauma because that's a big one as well. And oftentimes we just keep skipping that phase of our lives and just keep going, right? So now that you brought it to our attention that it can be connected, which obviously can be connected to stress, how is that connected to or maybe what are the steps that can someone can take if they've already been dealing with some kind of emotional trauma just to help them in that aspect? Are you able to speak on that?
Sure. I mean, that's a lot of what I do is help people
Okay.
with
Awesome.
trauma. So, the natural thing to gravitate towards, if you're thinking, okay, I'm stressed and upset about what happened to me, is to go to psychotherapy. And what's been discovered is that talking about a trauma doesn't help.
Mm,
In fact, talking about a trauma can be re-traumatizing in terms of, you're bringing it up. So, the memories come up and people can get flooded and overwhelmed.
mhm,
And there's a book about this called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, where he talks about that. They've done brain imaging studies where they show that the part of the brain involved in talking shuts down when people are triggered. And you can't really reach it by talking about it. You can't really fix it by talking about it. You can get support, you know, if you're feeling very alone in your emotional pain, you can get support from talk therapy. But there are people who've been to therapy for 10, 20 years, and they're still not over their trauma. You have to get at it by getting at the part of the brain where the trauma lives, and that's the right brain. So there's a number of things that have been developed that do help that. The ones that I use are something called energy psychology,
Okay.
where you focus for a very short period of time on what happened while you tap or touch different parts of the body that are basically energy meridians. And that seems to take the charge out of the memory. You know, so there's a psychologist, Dr. Peter Levine, who's written very widely about it. He says post-traumatic stress disorder isn't psychological, it's physiological. It's the trapped energy in your body from, you know, freezing after a trauma, you know, not being able to get away, that gets stored in the nervous system, and you have to get it out of the nervous system. So energy psychology is one. That's the one that I use most in my practice. Dr. Levine has developed something called somatic experiencing, where he actually works very physically with that in terms of people going through different movements to discharge the energy. There's something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is where you recall the memory, and then you usually it's you watch a finger go back and forth, or different ways of going from the right to the left side of the body helps process the memory. The only problem I have with that is if people have a lot of trauma, it brings up their trauma and they can get flooded. So I don't, I'm trained in EMDR, but I don't use it as much. It's okay if it's single incident trauma, but if people have a lot of trauma, it doesn't, you know, it can be overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
So,
Someone I
okay.
recently ended up in the hospital after starting EMDR because she just had so much trauma and got so flooded. Um, and the other thing that I use in my practice is neurofeedback, which is brainwave biofeedback. And what that does is it calms the chronic overarousal in the brain. And it's really good for just calming down, you know, a traumatized brain that maybe has never been calm, you know, especially if you grew up in a very dysfunctional family where you never felt safe, your brain never really learned to be calm. So, neurofeedback can teach your brain to calm down. And it's very effective for people with PTSD, and particularly with people with childhood trauma. And it does make being able to talk about the problem a lot easier because you're starting with a default mode that's very relaxed as opposed to where most traumatized people live most of the time. So it can make people more amenable to psychotherapy to work through what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's recap. I heard the energy psychology. Is that the same as bio emotional healing? Will you say that's the same or it's not quite?
I'm not familiar with that term
Okay.
specifically. There's something called emotional freedom technique, which
Okay.
is the, you know, what I do is kind of a hybrid technique from different variations of energy psychology. But there's a tapping technique called emotional freedom where you tap on certain spots. You tap on, you know, it's like this, and the patient does it themselves while
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking the trauma. You do your hands, your under your arms, whatever. There's a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of spots, and it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
how quickly it will work and how long lasting the effects are. Um, I had a woman who came in, and she's in her 70s, and 50 years earlier, she had had an abortion. And every day she tortured herself with guilt over what she had done.
Mhm.
Um, and we did this, and that just stopped. It just stopped. She
Mm.
stopped thinking about it. She stopped obsessing about it.
Mhm.
So, and that's after 50 years. I've
Wow.
had people
Yeah.
come with childhood trauma that's 50 years old that, when they bring it up, when they think about it, it's still extremely upsetting. And
Mhm.
what it does is you don't forget about what happened, but the emotional charge isn't there. You can say it happened, it was bad, but I'm over it. I survived it. I'm okay now. You know,
Mhm.
so so it just makes things a lot easier.
Yeah. So, when I'm listening to you, what I can think of is acupuncture, right? This is not my expertise, but I'm thinking is it triggers maybe the pressure points and that helps with the nervous system. Is that basically how it works in layman's term? Something like that, or not
I
quite?
think that there's some research on this and they're not sure. It seems to trigger endorphin release.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to, like I said, it dissipates. The theory behind it, by its developers, is that when you're thinking about something upsetting, there's like an energy field around you that's present, so when you think of something upsetting, the energy of that emotion, some people think of emotions as energy in motion. So all that energy from that is present, and you're basically interrupting it. You're breaking it up,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's gone. Um, and, it's it's somewhat loosely based on acupuncture meridians, energy meridians that acupuncture works on. And all the spots that you tap are acupuncture points, but you're not using needles. You're just using your hands with tapping or holding the spots.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you for breaking it down for us. Yeah, because when a lot of people, we all deal with some kind of emotional trauma. So I'm glad that you talked about the connection of that and stress and how it even translates to the neuropathy that, most people are dealing with. So let's go back to, so I know you've already said some of the strategies, but are these the same strategies that can also help with I know it's connected to neuropathy, but are these the strategies that you use for people that have the nerve pain when they come to you?
Well, the energy psychology is for trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, any kind of relaxation technique that is effective for the person will be helpful, as anything that will get you out of that fight or flight response. So things like meditation, things like deep breathing, things like a body scan where I go from the top of my head down to the toes. Some people do it the opposite, but it's actually more relaxing. You just start with awareness at the top of your head. You go through your body, notice any tension, and just kind of suggest that your body relax. That's another technique that I use. I do it with biofeedback. The most common thing that I use with neuropathy and with any kind of pain is hand temperature biofeedback. So we've talked about, the relationship between the stress response and hand temperature and getting that circulation into your peripheral tissues in your hands and
Mm-hmm.
feet. So I use biofeedback to actually measure the temperature of the hands and teach people relaxation techniques. And what biofeedback does is it measures your physiology and gives you information. So the instrumentation I have in my office measures temperature to the 100th of a degree. So it's very sensitive to changes. And as people try different techniques of relaxation, they
Mm-hmm.
can see their progress in terms of warming their hands, or you can even work on warming the feet,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little more challenging, but you can learn to do that. So I teach relaxation. We're monitoring hand temperature. They can see how it's going and what's working. And over time, there's a little device that I have people purchase. It costs $25. Um, and it's a hand temperature device that measures to 1/100th of a degree. If you practice that with relaxation, if you pay attention to your results, you can learn to warm your hands and feet. And what that means is that's just a measure of how relaxed you're getting. But in terms of peripheral neuropathy, it's also a measure of, are you getting that circulation you need back into your hands and feet?
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that I do. Um, for people with a lot of trauma, I like to do the brainwave biofeedback. That's more intensive treatment, has to be done more often, has to be done in the office.
Mhm.
But that can be, just general system calming so that you don't have to as much be monitoring and consciously trying to warm your hands. Your
Mhm.
system will just be calmer and
Yeah.
it's long lasting. Once you do enough of it, it just becomes the way your brain functions, at a
Mhm.
calm level where you not only get better circulation, but all those other things, any, muscle pain gets better, your immune
Yeah.
system functions better, your healing gets better, all those things improve. So, your focus gets better, your brain works better in terms of focusing and thinking. So, that's a really good strategy, but one that's not readily available in terms of practitioners and
Mhm.
also, a big time and money commitment. Um, but these things can really help.
Mhm. Mhm.
Meditation, is
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah, often as you're mentioning these things, oftentimes we don't think that these, technologies or even the things that you're sharing can actually help us have that transformative healing journey, right? So I love that you're bringing this up because I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. Because whenever you think of solutions, we are thinking of a supplement. We are thinking of, certain things. We rarely think about these things that you're talking about. And I mean, a lot of people will say, okay, it's nice that she's saying that, but I want to see how transformative it has become. And I love that you shared that example. So can you share maybe one to two more examples of how this has actually helped someone, with neuropathy? I love that example of the lady that you had shared. So I know a lot of people just want the supplement. What can I take? What can I do? Things like that. So share a little bit more about like people that have actually gotten great results from doing this.
Well, I'm having trouble bringing up specifically a
Yeah.
neuropathy result. I do have a client um, who has lots of trauma in her history. She has neuropathy. She has small fiber neuropathy. She has fibromyalgia. She has um, digestive issues. So we did neurofeedback and biofeedback with her. And at the time that she came in, she's just turned 50. She she was barely able to work. She was practically suicidal. She felt like she had no hope, and she came upon my name and information about what I did and saw me, and she credits me with saving her life. Because
Wow.
she's been able to keep working. I can't say she's pain free, she's still got a lot to deal with, but she's able to live a full life. She's able to meet her
Thrive. Yeah.
ability. She's able to get to work every day. Um, she feels it's been a real lifesaver for her. And she has skills now. The thing about it is that with the mind body stuff, I know a lot of people with chronic pain are very financially restricted. Their pain has affected their productivity, their ability to work or work very much. And the thing about mind body skills is once you master them, they're there. They don't cost you anything. you
Yeah.
know,
It's
you can use
free.
them.
You're
Yeah,
right.
they're available any time of the day. Sleep is another issue. A lot of people have trouble with sleep who are stressed. If you wake up in the middle of the night, and you're stressed, you can use a relaxation technique or the energy psychology technique in the middle of the night to get yourself back to sleep and be more rested. So, I think that's a major benefit is that
Yeah.
it's a skill and no one can take that away from you.
Yeah, I'll be having for the
You don't
rest
have to
of your
spend a
life.
lot
Yeah.
more money. You might spend a little money going to a healthcare practitioner to learn the skill, but once you have it, you know, you have it and it's yours. And, you know, it's, as I mentioned when I was telling my own story, a sense of lack of control really ups your stress level and really ups your pain level. So the minute that I got the idea that, yes, this is something I can control, it's not just my body attacking me and I can't do anything about it. I have something I can do that can improve it. And that made all the difference in the world. That's like step one is, believing that this is something you can manage. This is something that you can improve.
Yeah. Oh, this is so insightful, Cindy. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, for people that, probably are listening and they're like, okay, I'll do all this stuff, right? But they are in pain right now. They don't know what to do about it right now. I know that there are some non-pharmaceutical stuff that they can do, right? One I can think of is maybe capsaicin, even ointment, something for temporal relief, right? Be putting their soaking their feet in Epsom salt, right? In a warm water full of Epsom salt. Do you have any hacks for that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I really like some of the topical creams that have CBD and essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite one, unfortunately, the company recently went out of business, not because their product wasn't wonderful, but due to family illness. It was a mom and pop shop and they shut down. But there are a bunch of them. If people go to my website, paintreatmentdirectory.com, um, there's a whole product section, and there are some CBD topicals that can be very helpful. Another thing that I really love is red light therapy, red and infrared therapy. And there are home use devices you can get. They help with inflammation, they help with pain, they help with healing. The minute I found out about red light therapy, and this was in 2015,
Yeah.
I went right out and I spent $10,000 on a device because I was so, thrilled about what I read about it. I thought it was such a useful thing. Now you can get a really good device for a couple of $100, that you can use. It's not a clinical device like the device I have, you use on a spot for a minute, where, the home use devices you might have to use for 20 or 30 minutes. But, you can use them while you're sitting around at home. You can put your feet on a light pad, while you're watching TV or eating your dinner or whatever. I like to sleep on mine sometimes. If something's hurting, I'll just, put it on my body while I'm sleeping, and they have timers so they shut off. So I really love that. So that's another thing. There are different patches you can get, super patches. There's some for freedom patch is a pain
Mm-hmm.
patch, and it doesn't have anything in it. It just triggers your nervous system to relieve pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just want to mention one other thing that's so phenomenal, and it's not that readily available, and you need a practitioner. It's called Calmare Scrambler Therapy. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm. No, no.
Okay, so it's really interesting. This has to do with what I was talking about the brain continuing to send pain signals even when there's no need. So what Calmare therapy does is they put electrodes in the area where you have pain, and it sends a signal to the brain that scrambles the brain's pain signal and gets it to stop sending the signal. And in an average of 10 sessions over 2 weeks, many people are pain free or close to it, many of whom have suffered from pain for many, many years. So there's a couple of articles and practitioners on my website that talk about that. And it's another option for people with neuropathy. It's specifically for nerve pain.
Nerve pain. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I would love for you to share the links, so the audience can read more about it. And if they have to do, I don't know whether you do some of these virtually or because it's kind of hard sometimes to
Oh,
do things.
Yeah, Calmer therapy has to be done in the office,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people go so far as some of the practitioners attract people worldwide, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not readily available, and it can be done in a concentrated period of time. Like I said, the average is 10 sessions over 2 weeks. So there
Mm-hmm.
are people who have some financial means, who
Yeah.
will travel to do it. I'm fortunate to have somebody right in my area who does it
Mm-hmm.
that refer people to. Um, so, that's something to look into if people are able to
Yeah.
manage. But short of that, there's a lot of other things that people can.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. This was insightful. Very, very, very good. I love it. And as a pharmacist, I just want to say this as well. Sometimes the medications that we take even can cause the neuropathy itself, even though we have some that treat the neuropathy. But even metformin, for example, it depletes B12, right? And B12, but metformin is a common medicine that a lot of people with, blood sugar issues or even diabetes take. And B12 can deplete your myelin sheath, which is the covering of that protective covering over your nerves, right? So sometimes all you have to probably do is to take vitamin B supplement sometimes, right? But obviously, this is something that you have to talk to your doctor about, especially if you're on metformin and it depletes these vitamin B. And if you're lacking that, it can also cause neuropathy. So there are so many, and I love the non-pharmaceutical strategies that you gave us. This is so insightful. And I know that the people that are watching are empowered because they know that this can actually help in their transformative journey, right? So before we wrap up, is there something else you want to share with the person that is really dealing with the pain? Because I know it, like I mentioned in the beginning, if nothing else will motivate you to take control of your blood sugar, that will be that nerve pain because that is very frustrating. Is there something that you want to share with them?
Well, I always like to end with this hope. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been in pain or how severe your pain is. There's hope. And unfortunately, if you go to the conventional doctors, they'll say there's nothing more that we can do. Like
Mhm.
they said to me, there's nothing, there's so much more that you could do. It's just that, your average MD is not trained in that. They don't know about it. So they're saying that what they're really saying is I don't know what else to do. So there's always something that you can do.
You can
There's
do it.
always hope. Maybe you can't become 100% pain free, but you
Hmm.
can definitely, tone it down a lot and maybe even recover completely, you
Yeah.
know. So there's hope.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Definitely with the right tools and support, healing is definitely possible. So that's the reason why, we did the summit just so people will hear that it's not about taking pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. There are other stuff that you can do that can help you getting under to the underlying problems, right? Figuring out what is aggravating these symptoms. And once you do that, that healing will show up, right? So I love that. That's a great reminder. There's hope, and I love that as well. So I know you do have a free guide for us. Can you share a little bit about what you're giving to the audience?
Okay, well, it's a natural approach to peripheral neuropathy. So it's going to cover not just the mind body stuff that I've mostly been talking about today, but it will cover, things like diet, things like exercise, basically lifestyle issues that have to do with
Mhm.
peripheral neuropathy, and also, products that might help, links to information that might help. So, it'll be a comprehensive guide to
Yeah.
natural approach to peripheral neuropathy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That is really good. I love everybody. Please, we'll share the links for you to get that information. So if you want to connect with Cindy, we'll have all those links for you. Thank you so much, Cindy. This has been a true eye opener. It's not just about the pharmaceuticals. Like I said, there are things that we can do to help with the neuropathy and nerve pain that we are having. So I want to say thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for giving your all, giving all the wisdom that you have. So I appreciate it as well. So, guys, please opt into what Cindy is sharing. And until next time, we will see you. And while you're waiting for the next video, take care of yourself. Be good. And there is hope, like Cindy said. Healing is definitely possible for everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.